My name is Annemies Bear. I stand on land where my ancestors, the Voortrekkers, spilled the blood of the Ama Ndebele and other ethnic groups prior to settling. I embody white privilege. I hold a bachelor's degree in music from the University of Pretoria and 2 postgraduate degrees, a master's and PhD in musicology from the University of Stellenbosch. To counter the reputation of these former white institutions, I prefer to play up the ways in which my musical training is tied to this institution, the University of South Africa. I have moved through UNISA's renowned system of graded music examinations since I started learning to play the piano at the age of 8. And while still at high school, I participated in the National Music Bursary competition after having completed the grade 8 flute music examination with distinction. 2 years later, as a first-year music student, I participated again after having achieved the same results for the piano examinations. In my final year, I completed the teacher's licentiate in piano, and another 2 years later, the performer's licentiate, for which I again was invited to participate in the bursary competition. The stage for these accomplishments is the prestigious one right next door in this very building on the main campus of UNISA. The model for UNISA's graded music examinations was taken from London, and the history of music education in South Africa and of this institution is colonial. What I present here is more than the report to which the title to my paper lays claim. It is a music educator's emerging manifesto for decolonising the teaching of Western art music in history and society. In 2016, against the backdrop of the Fallist movement, the music section of the Department of Arts and Music initiated a recurriculation of the Bachelor of Music degree. The program comprises 2 streams. The CST stream focuses on composition studies. They are, in simple terms, the musically technical modules, and they cover an array of genres with focuses on Western art music, African music, jazz, and popular music styles. The stream also includes modules on music technology and sound production. The second stream of modules have MHS codes, Music in History and Society. The stream mirrors the foci of the CST modules in that they cover fields of Western art music, African music, jazz, and popular music. It also supplements the CST technology modules with a module on music business. B+ students must complete all modules in both streams. However, the MHS stream is also available to Bachelor of Arts students who want to major in music studies. The stream thus serves students whose technical music literacy levels vary from rudimentary to competent. The overall design of the curriculum aims at transforming music education on several levels. It counters the dominance of Western art music, a prominent critique of music curricula globally, by expanding the reach of musical skills and knowledge to other genres, and it diversifies the mode of skills and knowledge from pure musical ones to include others in technology and entrepreneurship. One aspect worth acknowledging at this point is that diversifying does not translate seamlessly into transformation. A comprehensive and systematic reflection on the strengths and weaknesses of the new curriculum is pending. The outline of its structure here contextualizes the report on a single module, MHS 3714, Opera and Choral Music. Opera and choral music was originally envisioned as a kind of capstone module in a series of 4 that surveys the chronological development of music in the Western world from ancient Greece through to contemporary times. I received the module form for opera and choral music, which capture its conceptual design, with a brief to develop lessons on the topics listed in the syllabus outline. The 2019 version of the module form reflected the ways in which the module was supposed to recapitulate the survey of the history of Western music. It revisited these genres in their 18th, 19th, and 20th century European and American contexts in more detail. Writing study material for this design would have been simple compared to the direction it ended up taking, because the resources for such a conventional history are plenty. But I felt uncomfortable about the design. I wondered whether it was necessary to rehash content that has already been covered over the course of 3 years. how could I develop the content for this module in a way that would promote transformation? If I were to strictly follow the syllabus outline on the module form, would it be possible to develop content without keeping the course locked in a primarily Western framework, and this at an African university intent on its program of Africanization? Also, and this is important, why continue to rehash a history of opera and choral music in a way that keeps them elsewhere, in Europe and the United States, when these very genres have such rich and beautiful expressions right here in our own country on home soil? My sense was that a module on opera and choral music offers a unique opportunity to open the narrative on the history of Western art music, to directly engage questions around transformation and decolonization. But the problem was that the resources for the kind of material I wanted were scarce. There are no educational textbooks to either use or to serve as templates for the design, and few scholarly monographs existed to inform the subject matter. What made matters worse was the fact that I am not an opera scholar. But since the beginning of my postgraduate years, I've witnessed the burgeoning of opera studies in South Africa, and I've seen its scholars consolidate into the Black Opera Research Network. An important research output that preceded the formation of this network is Naomi Andre's book on Black opera, which asks the question, and I quote, "How can a genre that resisted the participation of Black people tell us anything about the past or the present in the context of such strong cultures of white supremacy?" End of quote. Naturally, this book strongly influenced the design of the module. I also happen to have research connections with several members of the network, including Hilde Roos and Juliana Pistorius, who have done pioneer work on the Yoan group. The solution to my dilemma was found in networking and collaboration. The department appointed specialist researchers to write study material. Juliana Pistorius wrote 3 of the 5 lessons, David Smith wrote material on choralism in South Africa, and I contributed 1 lesson. My network is conspicuously white, but the end product nevertheless does us proud. The first lesson introduces debates about the status and relevance of opera as a genre in the 20th and 21st centuries. As early as the 19th century, Richard Wagner, creator of the Gesamtkunstwerk, announced the death of opera. In 1935, against the backdrop of Hitler's rise in power in Europe, George Gershwin, a Jew in the United States, defied Wagner by staging his opera, Porgy and Bess. It was one of the earliest operas known to history that was composed for an all-black cast to tell an African-American story. Porgy and Bess brings opera and jazz together. Historically and crudely, opera has been associated with notions of whiteness, while jazz evokes impressions of blackness. The history of opera continued in the 20th century, despite many assertions of its demise. Just 3 years ago, Anthony Davis, an African-American opera composer, responded in an interview to the purported death of opera as follows: "No, no, no. Just because you white guys are done with it, we are not done. Because our stories have not been told, so forget that." End of quote. The second lesson puts us at the historical fount of colonialism, 19th century missionary schools in South Africa, where black converts to Christianity learned Western hymnody in congregational settings and were trained musically using the tonic salva system. Western music notation was, of course, considered too advanced. We considered the historical, social, and political complexities of the early 20th century that surrounded Ruben Kaluza's song, Lusapho Lwaze Afrika. The song responds to the Land Act of 1913, the first major piece of segregation legislation to be passed by the Union government. The lesson is provocative in the way that it presents the polemics of black choralism during and after apartheid. It does not tiptoe around the internal discontents of local communities vis-à-vis the black middle-class intelligentsia who gathered around this tradition, and difficult questions are asked about the politics of repertoire and about interracial collaboration, construed by many as colonial pandering. At the same time, we deliberately but cautiously highlight post-apartheid Simonye moments when we look at the nation-building mass choir festivals in Soweto, the legacy of Ladysmith Black Mambazo, and the song Shorsaloza. The lesson finally casts the country's vibrant choralism as the seedbed for introducing operatic repertoire to communities and for producing some of the most successful music vocalists who have gone on to having careers as opera performers, like Pretty Yende. The third lesson paints a picture of white opera life in South Africa during the apartheid years. Attention is paid to the activities of several white government institutions that promoted an opera culture in South Africa. These include the Performing Arts Councils, the State Theatre in Pretoria, and the Nico Milan Theatre in Cape Town, today known as the Artscape. A case study of the EON group fractures the narrative of the hegemony of whiteness during apartheid, but raises complicated questions on complicity and compromise. The EON group was an opera company that comprised members from the Cape Coloured community. The final two lessons offer case studies to guide our inquiry into opera in the context of a democratic South Africa. The final two lessons offer case studies to guide our inquiry into opera in the context of a democratic South Africa. Lesson 4 considers modern productions of canonic works, such as the filmed production of an Africanized plot of Bizet's Carmen, with its text translated into isiXhosa. The fifth lesson introduces newly composed works. Mzilikazi Khumalo's opera on the life of Princess Magogo Kadinozulu, and Cape Town Opera's Mandela Trilogy. We ask whether one can talk about a new genre called African opera, and what such a label could mean sociopolitically, intellectually, philosophically, and in practice. The module's content is now in place, and its objective towards decolonization asserted. However, the design, syllabus outline, and developed content provide only the scaffolding for decolonizing the curriculum. Its objective must now be pedagogically implemented and tested, so that it can be adjusted and revised when it is found wanting. It will be found wanting. Not only is there deep discomfort at the whiteness of those who developed the module, there is also a concern that the content is already outdated. Of course, the latest research will be included in the reading lists that are updated annually, but the challenge is to keep the teaching current and relevant, on par with what is happening both in practice and in research. The instinctive assumption spawned in the traditional teaching environments of my training is that the lecturer must bear the burden. A pedagogical approach, however, that speaks to this concern in digital learning environments is connectivism. In its early iterations during the first decade of the 21st century, connectivism emphasized the half-life of knowledge, which refers to knowledge being measured in months and years, where earlier it was measured in decades. Knowledge and learning have become hyperdynamic. The theory proposes that knowledge now resides in networks, and learning refers to the ability to access those networks and navigate their connections. Thus, when translated into a methodology of learning, connectivism becomes a model of network formation rather than a model of knowledge acquisition. Shifting the focus from content to the importance of networks in learning replaces the instructor's task of imparting knowledge with one of guiding learners to discover and navigate existing networks. Connectivism effectively breaks the educator's control on content and transforms teachers and students into autonomous lifelong learners. It ties them together in a project of co-creating knowledge, using everyone's individual place in the network as point of departure. Gambo describes ways in which online learning brings students of diverse cultures together to discuss, debate, interact, and experience learning. And he observes that this approach resonates with African traditions of collective engagement, experiential learning, demonstration, and orality. It is here that connectivism and decoloniality partner in pointing the way forward for decolonizing music studies in a digital world. In the context of my module, This means that my task as instructor is to help students orient themselves in relation to the topic. In Lesson 1, we do this in a discourse around whiteness and blackness, and in Lesson 2, through students' reflections on their unique music training backgrounds, some immersed in classical music, many in jazz and popular music, and several in tonic solfa. The productive challenge is for teachers and students, now on equal terms as lifelong learners, to then find their ways to each other. Departing from authentic positions of individual experiences and knowledge, we must learn how to access and navigate the knowledge networks around opera and choral studies to find points of connection with the musical worlds of peers. This is not a naive utopian exercise. Learners are not expected to resolve differences and exit the course having established peace and harmony. It is nevertheless an exercise in responsible citizenship, in contributing to knowledge by exploring our own worlds and engaging those of others through networks. In some cases, as was the case with this module, the instructor may need to create networks. I did this by co-opting researchers to write study material and by inserting myself into the Black Opera Research Network. Students access this network when they register for the module, and they navigate it as the semester progresses. These networks must expand if the module content is to meet the criteria of being knowledge. Expansion, in my opinion, must result from effective assessment designs that inspire engaged assessment participation. In other words, designs that encourage students to explore and discover unknown territories. Another way to expand networks, I suggest, is through open educational resources. Few, if any, OERs are available for the module that I have developed, but this is not a drawback. I have the floor for doing pioneer work and an opportunity to expand the network. Why not record interviews with composers, performers, and stage directors, or make video clips of guest lectures available to students? How about partnering with lecturers at other universities who teach similar topics to pool existing educational resources and create new ones together? And would it not be great if those resources can be open for colleagues across all institutions to use in their courses? A manifesto in the making for decolonizing Western art music in education emerged from designing and developing the syllabus for MHS 3714, opera and choral music. This proto-manifesto, with which I close, might look as follows. Diversifying and decolonizing are not the same. Decentralized synchronic slices disrupt colonial diachronies. Curriculum and research belong together. Collaboration bridges the gap. Storytelling decolonizes the imagination. Curriculum transformation is open-ended. Teaching is colonial, learning is decolonial. Teachers and students co-create knowledge. Teachers and students are lifelong learners. Lifelong learners eschew hierarchies. Open-ended transformation entails engaged pedagogy.